in our broadcast, and I'll migrate anybody over if they're there.
Barb Riley. Good evening, Stephen. Good evening, Barb.
Hey, Joe. Hi, everybody.
Evening.
You hear us okay, Steve? All right, yeah, your audio's off. It doesn't matter how loud you yell. We're not going to be able to hear you. It's good you have tech support. Oh, there you go.
Now you can hear me.
Yes, now I can hear you. Thanks, Samantha.
You're welcome.
I'm so smart. I'm using her iPad, which I don't usually use.
Oh, okay. That's why you look even taller than usual.
Oh, could be.
Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hi, Janet.
Have you been having a great summer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay, I'm so glad. You know, I just got back from Italy. Don't cry for me. And I wore my conservation.
I'm not crying. Don't
I
worry.
wore my hat, Joe. I wore my hat a lot of times.
In Italy?
Yeah, representing. I was representing.
There you go.
It was great.
That's definitely the, well, I don't know if Steve wore his in New Zealand or not, but
No, I didn't.
You did not, Steve. Oh,
right. So you have that record now, Janet.
yeah.
Next time I go there, maybe I'll wear it.
Well, you
Yeah,
should.
definitely.
Does
Yeah,
that
so-
mean you were recognized as a celebrity?
Yeah, that's
Definitely.
No, it just said American tourist.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it said. Hard to hide that, you know, very hard.
Well, you guys will be happy to know that there are going to be 4 continuances tonight, including 3 notices of intent.
Oh, good.
That is great.
You know, the bill does come due at some point, right?
Yes, this is true. This is true.
Hopefully on a rainy night.
Yes.
The cold, rainy night. All right. Well, it is 6:45, so we may as well get this meeting going. Bring this meeting to order. This is the September 2nd, 2025 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting taking place on the Zoom platform. This meeting's being recorded. First item of the approval of the meeting minutes from August 5th. Do we have any changes, comments,
I noticed something, Joe. It was under the request for determination of applicability for 14 Harbor Street. Nobody like voted on that or move. There was no second motion on
Oh,
the negative determination.
oh, it wasn't listed?
Yeah, Janet moved to issue it, and then
So it's just the second that's missing, is that what you're saying?
yeah, the second and the
Okay.
motion around the room was missing as
Okay.
well.
I'll put that in.
Okay. Anything else? Hearing
Motion,
nothing.
motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second,
Okay, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, on to Plum Island updates. Andy, do we have anything for Plum Island?
No, not from me at the moment. The only thing I was going to mention again, and I was going to suggest, I'll defer to you as chair in the commission, but I was going to suggest that the following item be postponed until after the hearings, just for the applicants that are already in waiting. But for Plum Island updates, the only thing I was going to mention was just that we have this upcoming notice of intent that you'll see for the removal of the house at 975th Street, the one house that was part of the FEMA buyout program. So
Oh, okay.
nothing surprising there per se, but just wanted to let you know that's coming along. There is still continued work that needs to be done by the Army Corps, and we still need to pick up discussions with Department of Conservation and Recreation regarding the beach management plan in coordination with them, not surprisingly, with Plum Island Point, but that's the only things I mentioned at the moment.
Okay. All right, so we'll leave the resiliency checklist discussion for later, the end, and move on to certificates of compliance, etc. So Port Plaza has requested a continuance to what day? September 16th?
16th, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we can get a motion for that.
Motion to continue to September 16th.
Second,
Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Bob Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
yes.
and I vote yes. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. Who else? Oh, Julie's here too. Okay. All right. Next item is Michael DeFlumer, 2 Harbor Street, request for certificate of compliance. Do we have anybody?
Do we have a hand in the audience from who's representing to speak to this particular matter? We do have the plans, obviously, to display for the as-built conditions, but is there someone representing the applicant? We don't see anybody in the audience at the moment.
Was this, all the paperwork on this was back in 2013, wasn't it? It looked like.
From the original permit, yeah, but there was an as-built. I'd have to check for a moment on the as-built plan, the date of that, but
I think that was back then too. Maybe I'm wrong, but
just looking at that now. So site plan for the notice of intent, and then the as-built. What's this? Revision date. Oh, here we go. July 1st, 2013.
2013.
yeah, all of this stuff is 2013, so I'm a little confused.
Well, I mean, it's not, I didn't have a lengthy discussion with this particular applicant. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of context, but I know it's not unusual to have certificates that are sometimes outstanding years later, brought up at some time of a closing or something like that.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I would just agree with that. I would agree with that. I think this was all done sort of on schedule back in 2012, 2013. And then they just sat on it. They got the as-built plan done. And they really just didn't come forward to try and get the actual certificate of compliance until now. And so we asked them to supply photographs, current photographs of the site so that we could just sort of confirm it. And that's what these are. And, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of wonderful vegetation that got planted, but at the same time, looking back at the original notice of intent plans, there was really nothing actually specified back then for plantings. So,
Yeah, I had the same review of that file, same finding in that. Yep, agreed.
yeah.
with
So
Julia.
it's regrettable that there's no one here representing it, but I think this is all the
Yeah, it's unfortunate we don't have anybody here, but like Julia said, in review of the file, a view of what's constructed there, it's, substantially complete and consistent with the plans that were filed. So the office sees no reason not to grant the certificate, I guess, in quick summary. So.
Okay, it's fine with me. Anybody else have an issue with that?
No.
Okay,
Motion to issue the certificate of compliance?
Second,
roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes,
Janet Daisley,
yes.
and I vote yes. Alrighty, can I get a motion to open the public hearings?
So moved.
All right, I'm gonna roll call it. Steve Moore? Oh, wait, we don't have a second.
Second,
All right, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
yes,
Janet Daisley,
yes.
and I vote yes. And someday I'll remember which ones we have to vote on and which ones we don't. First item is Judith Welch, 101 Curzon Mill Road, notice of intent. There's a request to continue this project until October 7th.
We've been continuing this for months.
Yeah, I did get a phone call from Tom Hughes today. He had noted that they still have some plans to review and coordinate with the health department on the septic. But my understanding is that they were making some progress in that. I'll defer to Tom. I don't have the details, but he did indicate that they were making some work on that, which was necessary to get the revised plan back to you. He mentioned, by the way, that there might be a RDA associated with that work, depending on what the plan is showing. He didn't explain that detail to me, but an RDA on the property across the street, just based on some of the details involved here. But again, that doesn't mean anything to me unless I've seen that plan. But he did suggest that they were making some progress in the plans they needed for the following meeting anyway.
Do we want to put a time limit on this one?
I could relay to him that the commission expects a presentation update at the next meeting and, not another continuance if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it does sound reasonable. This one has been languishing for quite a while.
Okay, I'll convey that to him.
Okay. So
Okay.
let's continue it this time.
Yeah. Motion to continue to October 7th?
second,
Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
yes,
Janet Daisley,
Yes,
and I vote yes. Next item is Cindy Singer, 5 Basin Street. Notice of intent. They have requested a continuance to the next meeting on September 16th.
A motion to continue to September 16th?
second,
Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
yes,
Janet Daisley,
yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, next is the City of Newburyport, 115, 157 Water Street, notice of intent.
Good
David,
evening,
did you
members
wanna-
of the commission. Yes, certainly.
Yeah, go
Thank
right
you,
ahead.
Andrew. Good evening, members of the commission, Mr. Chairman. This is our follow-up meeting from the site walk that we had last month. I thought we had a good site walk, and the revised plans that we had submitted back in July for some revisions regarding comments that we received during the first hearing. Also with me on tonight is Paul Martin, our wetland scientist, and Mike Clark, our LSP, for any questions that you might have on the notice of intent or the AUL. Next slide, please, Andrew. So just a reminder, the goal of this project is to provide critical city infrastructure protection, which is the wastewater treatment plant. This project is designed to protect the wastewater treatment plant from flooding. It's to design a flood protection barrier. Again, during flooding, we're using the existing revetment berm that's there already from the Merrimack River. The top of that berm is at elevation 14, and so that's elevation 14 is what we're using for the protection of the treatment plant. Additionally, as part of that, once we put flood walls up, we do need to mitigate any potential interior flooding during storm events. So, you know, as we had presented previously, we have some pretty big, large stormwater pumps that are interior to the wastewater treatment plant to be able to handle any runoff or flood waters that may get inside the walls. Next slide, please. So there was a question in regards to an existing AUL out there. So we do have a small area shown here in red. As part of this work, everything will be in compliance with the existing AUL and the Massachusetts contingency plan. As part of the bid package that will go out for this work, there'll be the preparation of a soil and an LNAPL management plan. Additionally, the contractor will have to prepare a HASPA, which is a health and safety plan. And the goal of any work within this area is that all of those soils will be disposed of at a site, at a landfill, where they legally will need to go. So we're not reusing any of those soils that get excavated for the stormwater lines that we're doing there, the catch basins, or any of those things. Next slide, please. So plan refinements, the majority, really the plan refinements are really two parts. One are revisions to the site plan and the stormwater on the right-hand side, which is kind of what we call the bowl by the abutters. And then the second part is providing a standard operating procedure during rainfall and flooding events. So first is the plan changes. As you recall, there's two catch basins in that load area, which are shown on the right side in the clotted area. The one to the left in that low area drains back towards the wastewater treatment plant. And originally we had that redirected out to the outfall to the left, to the right. That will stay where it is. That catch basin will continue to flow back to the wastewater treatment plant and ultimately to the flood pumps. Additionally, the two catch basins in that area, we are making them double grate catch basins. And then the catch basin to the right, we are increasing the size of the pipe. Right now it's a 12-inch draining to the manhole. We're going to make that a 24-inch. They are check valves on both catch basins, and the two drain manholes down in that area will also have locking frames and covers. So the reasoning for all of this is that what we want to do is improve the draining capacity of this low area. We have done some calculations by increasing the grate size and that 12-inch to a 24-inch. We get better draining capacity in that low area. Additionally, we are maintaining the catch basin connection back to the wastewater treatment plant that will allow that area to drain down during flooding events with the stormwater pumps so that it's not isolated. Next slide, please. So standard operating procedures. So normal daily rainfall events, flash flood events, all gate valves remain open. If you recall, we have a gate valve, we have two gate valves, one on each 24-inch line that drains directly to the Merrimack. We do have a gate valve on the catch basin we just discussed from the low area back to the wastewater treatment plant. There's a gate valve there. And then there's a gate valve from, I believe it's Salem Street, where that drain line goes directly through the wastewater plant. So during a normal rainfall events, even a flash flood event, all of those gate valves always remain open. The flood pumps will activate for any flood waters within the wastewater treatment plant if they get up to elevation 9.5. This will drain any floodwaters within the wastewater treatment plant. It'll also drain any waters that are in the low area to prevent any flash flood conditions from damaging the wastewater treatment plant and also from damaging properties in that low area. Next slide, please. During a catastrophic flooding event, so this is an event where there's a coastal storm and there's forecasting that there's going to be a surge from the ocean. What the wastewater treatment plant and the facility will do is they'll install the removable flood walls at the entry points. If you recall, we have aluminum gates that go in on the left-hand side of the plant where the entrances are for into the facility. That will fully enclose the plant up to elevation 14 from any floodwater being able to get in there. The facility will monitor storm conditions and floodwater elevations. And again, at this time, all gates are open. We're not closing any gates at this time. The floodwater pumps would activate just like they would for a storm that's flash flood up to elevation 9.5. The plant will monitor flooding elevations in the wastewater treatment plant. We will have a gauge installed to be able to monitor the floodwater elevations within the plant. It's important to understand that any floodwaters above elevation 10.98 really will cause damage to the infrastructure of the wastewater treatment plant. And so that's kind of our critical elevation that we really can't go above. So if the floodwaters continue to rise up to elevation 10 within the wastewater treatment plant, while both of the pumps are pumping, we would close gates 1 and 2. Gates 1 and 2 are the two gates that are on the outlets, the 24 inch outlets that are directly to the Merrimack. The other gate on the bowl area and from Salem Street coming down, those still remain open. We'll continue to monitor the floodwaters with those gates open and the two to the Merrimack closed. The pumps are pumping. If the pumps can't handle and we get up to elevation 10.75, we're now at a situation where we're facing catastrophic damage to the wastewater treatment plant, and we need to close floodgate 3 from Salem Street and floodgate 4 from the low area to the east. At this point, everything outside of the plant is being inundated with floodwaters from the ocean and the Merrimack, and we really need to protect the plant. That is the only time we're closing floodgates 3 and 4. As the floodwaters start to recede, we're going to open up floodgate 4 from the east and low area so that we can drain that. As they continue to recede, we'll open up floodgate number 3 from Salem Street. And then once all the other elevations are back to normal, we'll open up the 2 floodgates that go directly to the Merrimack. So this way, what we're trying to do is protect the plant and also the low area to the greatest extent possible by still maintaining the low area to be able to flow to the pumps. So hopefully the pumps, we believe, will in most cases be able to protect the low area in the wastewater treatment plant. It's only when we have that catastrophic event where everything is underwater that we're really going to have to close those gates and really focus on protecting the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide, please. So we did do some drainage calculations for the low area. If you look at the image on the left-hand side, that area in red, that's the existing low area. As you can see, kind of that baby blue, that flood area, that low area is really fed around the wastewater treatment plant to that area overland. If you look at the picture on the right, the yellow area is the new low area, sorry. So it is cut off from floodwaters being able to go overland into that area. It is slightly smaller. By increasing the catch basin grate sizes and changing the pipe size from a 12-inch to a 24, we're essentially able to reduce the flooding in that area about 8 inches from existing conditions. And that does not account for the catch basin still being connected to the pumps, which will even protect it for even more, reduce it even more. Next slide. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. I think we've addressed all of the concerns that the commission had, one by the changes we did to the plan, and then providing the standard operating procedures for how this will operate and not cause damage to the neighborhood.
I get one question. If a flood occurs, not a catastrophic event, but
Yep.
a flash flood, and it happens at the time of a king tide, would there be any closing of gates at that point to prevent flooding, particularly in the low area?
If the pumps can continue to keep pumping and we can keep the elevations down below 10, then no, there's no closing of any gates. It's only if we get up to elevation 10.5, then we would have, I'm sorry, is it 10 point? It's, bear with me 1 minute. It's only if we get up to elevation 10 that we would close the 2 gates to the river. We're not closing any of the other gates, not from the low area and not from Salem Street. If we get up to elevation 10.75, then we're going to have to close those other gates. So there is a potential we could potentially close those 2 gates that go directly to the Merrimack. In that situation, the 2 pumps pumping together should be able to handle any flash flood or any flooding coming into that area.
Okay.
Could you show the slide where the AUL is again, please?
Yep, that is slide 3. Yep. So it is a small area in that area. So we do have the flood protection walls going in there, as we discussed before. We're going to do 24-inch cores, about 15 feet deep. So all of that soil will get removed. And that actually gets, once the pile goes in, it gets filled with concrete. And then where we have the stormwater structures and the drain lines, the anticipation is that all that soil will get removed and disposed of at a landfill, and it'll be backfilled with clean soil.
So, is there actually LNAPL out there?
We believe that there could be.
Dave,
We
you
believe
want
that
me
there
to,
could be.
want me
Yeah,
to
go
weigh
ahead,
in here?
Mike. Sure.
Yeah, so based on the historical investigations of that parcel at 115 Water Street, there was floating product on the water table, and the AUL anticipates that any excavation below 3 feet below grade will encounter contaminated soil, contaminated groundwater, and potentially LNAPL as well. So there's planned excavations here. The AUL says for planned excavations, the contractor needs to prepare the soil and LNAPL management plan and a health and safety plan just to be prepared to deal with any eventuality associated with that historical oil contamination in the ground.
Yeah, when you say the contractor, the consultant, like you as the LSP will prepare that?
So the
Management plan?
contractor will be required to retain an LSP to prepare those documents.
Okay,
We can review those on behalf of the city to make sure that they're, reasonable and in compliance with the existing activity and use limitation.
okay. Yeah, I guess I think it's gonna be important for us to take a look at that plan because, I mean, that's where you're gonna be removing a lot of soil. And potentially contaminated, so, we wanna make sure that that's handled properly. There's no environmental exposure or health and safety exposure.
Right. And that's why the AUL is in place, and our plans and specs that go out for bid will specify that the contractor needs to have an LSP on board to prepare those plans and to oversee the work and prepare all of the soil disposal paperwork for approval by the receiving facility. It's a process that's it's been refined over many years now, and it's fairly common actually.
Yeah, I'm
This is
familiar.
this is Jordy. I was just thought I'd quickly weigh in, Barbara. We have dealt with these situations before, and I think it is you may know this better than most, but I think it is pretty common for in a situation like this, there's an LSP that's working for the contractor, there's an LSP representing the owner. When we were dealing with the PCBs, we had another LSP representing Mass DOT, multiple LSPs who work together to, figure out the best course of action. So we're certainly going to be paying attention to this and managing it properly. I don't think it rises to some sort of separate separate review. I mean, you're certainly welcome to join us um, when we're dealing with that during the construction phase. But I don't. It's not. It's too cumbersome to sort of have to go back to the Concom. I would
Mhm.
say to
Yeah, I don't think
with those
maybe
plans.
we need to review it, just, I think I think we should have a copy of it and be able to make comments to, as you review it.
Sure, that's easy enough for you all to engage as you're interested in those plans.
Yeah, so we can request something like that, put it as a
mean,
condition
yeah,
to supply that to us.
It's just it is a little different, and maybe you've handled this before, Jody, I'm not sure, but I know the PCBs are, more locked into the soil, whereas LNAPL is, can be quite messy.
Mhm. Yeah.
As it comes out and handling that, and making sure that, the soils are not, now you're in a floodplain, you're gonna stockpile those soils. What if we do get a flood, or are you gonna be taking that away and, in drums, and just, making sure that it's not going to re-enter, the environment. And I guess I'm kind of curious about why we have, like, how much LNAPL is there? Is that something that's being monitored? Is it just outside the wall, inside the wall, both? Will it be contained? Just a little
That's not going to be
curious about the
known.
situation, I guess.
I don't think there's going to be any records documenting, the amount. This line was drawn, this box was drawn when the previous project was done at the plant, recognizing that below that 3 foot cap, that this material is there. So again, I think it's yeah, it moves differently than PCBs, but it is a similar situation in terms of doing all the similar activities of trying to identify exactly where the material is through testing, and then figuring out the where it gets stockpiled, how it gets disposed of, chain of custody, all the rest of it.
Is that all right?
Yeah. I mean, as long as, as long as it gets done properly, that's great.
Okay. We have anything else? Any other questions?
No, I think they've made this. I'm mainly concerned with the neighbors. I understand we need to protect the treatment plant. And I think they've done everything they can to mitigate the problems that the neighbors might have, and hopefully they all work.
Well, that's always the hope. All right, now I can go to the public. Counselor Wright, you want to get your mic on? Go ahead.
Thank you for recognizing me. I'm sure this has been covered in previous presentations, but I just want to ask the question about power failures. I assume these pumps will be connected to a generator, and if there's sufficient capacity in the generator that keeps the plant going, will there also be enough capacity to keep the pumps going if there was a power failure?
Yeah, so the pumps will be connected to the existing generator that's at the wastewater treatment plant. It went through some upgrades a couple years ago, and we've already determined that there is capacity to run both of the pumps.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Okay, thank you. Paul DeMars. Go ahead. You'll need to unmute yourself. All right.
Yes, hi. My only question is, did you receive my second letter dated 8/11?
We have the 8/11 one, which starts off with revisions.
Right,
bulk revisions.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that was part of the record. That's all I have to say tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I got one more question. The generator we just talked about, is that above the 10.7 whatever feet that's critical?
Give me 1 minute here. I believe it is, I believe it's at elevation 11. It's sitting on a pad, so it is above that, correct? It is.
Okay,
Yep. I believe it's at elevation 12.
okay, so we should be good for a disaster.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Take a motion.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
All right, roll call. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes,
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, thank you, folks. We will, we're gonna go, that's right, we're gonna go in, we'll go right into the order of conditions for this. So do we have any special conditions?
I don't think so, just all the standard ones.
Yeah, I don't recall anything coming up previously or having been identified that isn't already addressed in the plans themselves.
Barb, do you have anything regarding the pollution?
Yeah, I mean, it's just without having anything up front, like they haven't done any testing, we're sort of just banking on the fact that everybody will do things properly. I think at the very least, we should get a copy of that soil management plan. You know, I know that the city has some familiarity with this, but if it really is like Apple, I think, you know, there could be lots of concerns to the public and to the environment, you know, if it's not handled properly.
If I may, might suggest to address Barbara's concern, I just, you know, as Jordy mentioned earlier, because these protocols are generally followed by the state expects LSPs to administer and oversee these types of processes, and the city obviously has to hire one to do this process. So perhaps to Barbara's point, we could just add a special condition indicating that any work in the AUL area, you know, would be overseen by an LSP, and that the copies of the report that Barbara mentioned would be provided to the commissions, you know, for the commission's record here, and obviously for the members to review if they wanted to. But just given that
Yeah.
stuff is already administered by a separate set of statutes and regulations and professionals, we could have a special condition that just makes it clear in the condition here, relative to resource area jurisdiction, that an LSP will in fact oversee that work.
Okay, we can get it uploaded to the city system too for.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. So David, for your purposes and Jordy, your purposes, that could just be uploaded to the OpenGov record when available so that the commission members could see that as a follow-up to the order of conditions being issued.
That's great.
Should work.
All right.
So just to be clear, so you're looking for whatever those plans would be for how the contractor would handle the hazardous materials before issuing the order of conditions?
No, just to be clear, I think the idea here is this is a condition of approval that after the issuance of the order conditions, that as a condition, you need to submit that material again, which obviously we're going to see the documentation that the LSP is overseeing that,
Yep.
that is provided for the commission's record. So that we just note here that you could, for your efficiency, upload
Okay.
it to the record. It would be a document uploaded after the order of conditions is issued, but it would be right there, for compliance with the commission's condition here. So.
Okay, perfect.
just-
Yeah, we could do that.
I would just quickly,
Yeah, go ahead. You just turn your mic back on, Julie.
sorry, I would just add to that, that it would make sense for that condition to read that such documents, hazardous materials management plans or soil management plans would be provided through the OpenGov system, prior to any such work taking place on the site.
Yeah,
rather than,
concur.
after the fact.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else have a question with that? That fine with everybody?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, do we have a motion?
Motion to issue the order of conditions with the special condition that we just talked about.
Second,
All right, roll call. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
yes.
and I vote yes. All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, on to Sandy Herbert, 455th Street, notice of intent. We have TJ Melvin.
Good evening, everyone. TJ Melvin with Millennium Engineering here on behalf of the applicant for the project located at 455th Street. So the Herberts are looking to tear down the existing single-family dwelling located on the property, has a full block foundation, and replace it with a single-family dwelling on a pile foundation above the floodplain. The majority of the site, we are proposing to remain kind of as is an existing gravel driveway to the left of the house as you look at it from the street, and a lawn area to the rear. There's also a shed on site in the back right corner of the lot that the applicant is looking to keep in place. As part of the mitigation for this project, there's I guess with the house itself, there's a slight decrease in the overall footprint of the house and decks on site, very minimal. It is about 10 square feet. In the front of the house, there's kind of a landscape stack stone wall with a kind of mulch planting area. So as part of mitigation, as part of this process, we would propose to remove that and replace it with some sort of native vegetation. Currently, we're calling out kind of a mix of American beach grass and some red fescue, just to get some native plantings back on site. And then the other aspect you can see on the right-hand side, kind of that gray hatch, would be to provide one parking spot that would be able to be accessed to access under the building, kind of get out of the elements in the winter and rain to access the house without getting completely soaked. So that I would be happy to answer any questions the commission may have. I do want to apologize too. So we did submit this plan a few weeks ago. We will be submitting a slightly revised plan with that. The footprint, all the other elements remain the same. We're just going to be shifting it about 3 to 4 feet closer to the road, just to stay in compliance with zoning requirements for the rear setback. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Joe, sorry, through the chair, could I ask a clarification question or two?
Yes.
One was just to clarify, your TJ, I think you're referring to this specific plan right here, right? Not that there's a subsequent plan coming, but rather this is the plan that you're asking the commission to approve as far as.
So it will be the same layout. It's just that building will be shifted like 2.5, 3 feet closer to 55th Street to comply with the rear setback to the deck. So yes, we will be submitting a subsequent plan to this.
Okay, before and submitting that before the expectation of an order of conditions referring to the approval. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. And if we need to
Got it,
request a continuance tonight, we can.
Okay, yeah, that actually maybe answers my other question, Joe, is just because I, in noticing in the record, the OpenGov record, there's 2 plans that I think were uploaded the same day, or at least have the same date on the hard copy. so to speak, the electronic, PDF.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't 100% clear, though you could see the timestamp in the system, which one was more recent. It's not 100% apparent because the dates on the plans are both the same. So if you're submitting a revised plan and has a subsequently revised date on it, that would address my concern, that there wouldn't be any confusion between one version and another of the plan that's being referenced by the commission. So if you're submitting a revised plan, it's going to have a new date on it, and that just addresses my concern about the fact that there are two plans in the record that look almost ostensibly the same, but have a couple of adjustments on them that one may not understand unless you're familiar with the plans.
Okay, yeah, I did open up the one with the rev marking on it. I assume that's the one you're talking about using?
Correct. Yeah, that appears to be the most recent plan. Of course, if that's being replaced, the non-issue maybe going forward. But my concern is just the fact that the other plan also had the exact same date in the PDF. So although the OpenGov system has a stamp indicating that the PDF is revised, it's not 100% apparent from our typical reference in an order conditions to a plan set because we're usually referring to the title block information. So given that the title block information was the same on both plans, it might have been confusing to someone. So here, I just think on a go-forward basis, it'll have another revision date on it. So we won't need to refer to either one of these that have the same date on them. So
Okay.
So if you're moving the house 2.5 feet closer to the street, you're reducing the revegetated area?
Yes, it would be by about 50 square feet.
Okay, can we get that 50 square feet back somewhere on the property?
We can, I guess that was kind of a question. So I was tinkering with this earlier today. The thought would be if we were to maybe remove some of the non-native lawn, if the commission would look at that kind of as a comparable solution to it. Other than that, there's, we're kind of proposing to keep the majority of the site the same. And maybe we could find a couple areas to maybe do some shrub plantings kind of in lieu of the 50 square feet, but I'd be open to any suggestions.
Well, we would love to see you remove all the lawn.
If you want to put it that way, yes, we would.
It lowers the maintenance.
But that,
yeah,
we can leave that up to you guys. But yeah, I would certainly, that was going to be my question too, was to see if we can get some of that lost native planting to replace some of the lawn.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I think we could definitely make up that that lost area, probably to the kind of like front right of the house, where we have that smaller area. But we can certainly come up with that same square footage.
Okay, yeah, if and if you find room where you want some native shrubs, that would also be very good.
Absolutely, yeah, I can talk with the applicant about that.
I meant to do some research on red fescue to see if that was a native, barrier beach plant, and I didn't. So the Pennsylvania sedge was. So just if you could provide some data on that also, or just replace it with beach grass.
Steve,
whatever.
just sorry to interrupt. I'd like to look that up myself also because I was curious, and it is listed in the Plum Island native planting list.
Oh,
Red
okay.
fescue.
Rescue is okay.
All right.
Yeah, we've kind of been at least with Salisbury as well on the beach, that they've kind of been asking for more of a diversification of any seed mixes that we're proposing, just to hope that at least something takes and it doesn't just all go away.
Okay,
Sounds good.
that answers my question.
Yep.
So I think I may have missed it. So this meets all the elevation requirements except for the shed? Is that because that's going to stay as is?
The elevation requirements
Yeah.
with regards to flood, yes. Yeah, so we're about bottom of the lower structural members, about 4.72 feet above the VE9 elevation.
Okay.
Can we go down, Andy? At least the one I have open has the elevations.
Yeah, it should be on the next sheet.
Yeah, there we go.
So we can see existing grades about 6.5, and the bottom of lower structural members 13.72. So just over 7.2 feet from existing grade and 472 over elevation 9 for the flood.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Barb, you good with that?
Yep.
Janet, you good? Okay.
Yep.
All right. We're all set with questions?
Yep.
Anybody from the public have any questions? All right, not seeing any. Take a motion.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley.
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, do we have any special conditions other than the Plum Island special conditions on this one?
I don't think so. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Just to
Well-
let the applicant know, there is on those plantings is, they have to be there for 2 years, and we'll judge before we issue a certificate of compliance.
Okay. All right, is that it? All right.
Yeah.
Take a,
Motion to issue the order of conditions?
Second.
okay, roll call, Seymour,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, the last one is Robert Phillips of Wildwood Drive, notice of intent. They have requested a continuance to the next meeting on the 16th.
Yeah, if we don't open this, do we need to continue it?
Yeah, just for continuity of notice, just 2 notices were issued, one saying the 2nd of September, the other one saying the 16th. So the request for continuance here is really just to make sure the 2 notices are aligned before you take up the matter. So taking the motion to continue tonight, just for the formality, will provide that continuity of notice to anybody who attended this meeting, in addition to anyone who got the written notice referring to the 16th. So.
Okay. Motion to continue to September 16th?
Second.
Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, got a motion to close the public hearings.
So moved.
I'll second. Roll call. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
Janet Daisley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, let's go back to the resiliency checklist.
Okay, if you all don't mind, I'm just going to show on OpenGov a page. So this, I believe that Julia and Joe already have some background on this, having been involved with some of the discussions previously. But the Resiliency Committee, this is I'm just showing here on our website, the OpenGov page where all the city's permits are housed. So by department or division, I'm actually skipping over here that you'll note the Conservation Commission and going down to the bottom to what's referred to as a test portal, where we just sort of are working on things that are not active at the moment for the general public to use, but are for us to try out. So here, this test portal is a resiliency checklist that was put together by some folks. It was sort of a special subcommittee of the Resiliency Committee, of essentially trying to put together some questions that if the Planning Board or the Conservation Commission were reviewing applications, would help both boards to assess the extent to which projects have incorporated resiliency or sustainability components in them. There's obviously, then a question from those questions to, is there a regulation that applies that might come into play? But the idea here is to make sure that folks are, at least as a minimum, sort of cognizant of these things, both the commissioners and looking at applications and the applicants coming in. I certainly don't want to speak for Julia, who's been involved with this a fair amount with the Resiliency Committee, or the other members who we don't have, the chair and some other members here at the moment. But for those who were involved in the development of this list, it was intended to perhaps serve the purpose for both boards of taking those factors into account. So you might see where, under a zoning decision, the board might take into account, whether or not a project is detrimental to a neighborhood. There might be something in the future that says, as a project incorporating resiliency measures or whatnot. But here, I think the intent is to make sure that at least as a starting point for the city, given that resiliency isn't something that's sort of mentioned specifically in that same capacity going back in prior regulations, that there's a good understanding of the general public when applying for permits in resource areas or buffer zones or hazard zones, I should say, that they're taking those things into account. So if it makes sense, I was just going to click through a little bit to show you what's there, and leave it to you if you want to pause or ask questions along the way. The goal here was essentially to get feedback from you as a commission, and I think to do the same with the planning board, to get an idea as to whether or not the members felt that this was helpful, whether or not it should be modified in some way, and or rolled out as part of the permit application process, like a sort of a part of the form that applicants fill out, and whether or not that's based on a project size or type and so forth. Those are all things to kind of discuss. So, does that make sense for me to just click through a little bit to give you an idea what that looks like?
Yeah.
So you're on OpenGov. Let's say you've got an account, there. So you're kind of clicking through your process just to log in. So, basic information is completed by the applicant. You're picking a location. So let's just say, sorry. Let me, okay. So let's say, just want to try whether, well, that didn't come up. Interesting. Yeah, 24 Merrimack. Just wanted to see whether they come up. Anyway, 24 Merrimack Street, that's the waterfront park. So basically the applicant's going to fill out some basic information here. There might be additional details. Some of these things are pulled from the assessor's database. So some of it's contact information. You'll see this stuff is pulled from the assessor's database, for instance. So that basic information is filled out. Sometimes there's, a discrepancy with an address or something like that occasionally. So there's a ability to resolve that. But this is basic information that's filled out. Just a little note. So this gives a little bit of notation, like I said, for folks. We might modify the language, the introductory language, but just clarifying what its purpose is. So it might inform the planning board and the Conservation Commission. And so you might have folks who are opening or looking at the resiliency checklist, which has a hyperlink to it. And so this is some instructions for it that the applicants review and the commission members and planning board members can become familiar with. But it speaks to some of the different terms and concepts used, things like silverized, storm surge, what the FEMA special hazard areas are, base flood elevation. So a lot of these terms we use on a regular basis. And then there's a resiliency checklist. So there's some things that might be done by applicants. And then there's a sort of a checklist. And again, I'll allow you guys to sort of peruse this at your leisure. We could take this up at a future meeting to, sort of close the loop on any of your thoughts. But the idea here is that this kind of gives people a guide as to the things that, the resiliency community and others are thinking of right now that could be done by applicants to, address some of that project couldn't incorporate certain things or work things better than others. But this is basically some of those things that could be considered in that process. And so folks will be able to cross-reference that. You can also see the committee's resiliency page, any, particular materials. And again, this could be fleshed out or modified for an intro. Then you go on to, there's a little bit of clarification about silverized before they go on to the next step. And then a given property is being tagged by the back end of our mapping system. So here it's noted that it's in a flood zone, and it sort of highlights and calls it out. And then this goes along with the idea of it being in a hazard zone, and therefore it makes sense to look at resiliency. Again, some more hyperlinks to helpful information. And then future flood hazard areas, you can basically do your options to answer these questions along the way if you're an applicant. And so again, you're sort of checking boxes, answering the questions as you go along. And so again, keep in mind that this is partly to inform and educate people, it's partly to help the commission and the planning board as a body or bodies to evaluate, whether projects are addressing these areas.
So would this be linked to a NOI application, or is this something separate that they would have to?
The great question. So I think we talked about there's two different ways that can mechanically happen. We'd like to have it integrated as part of the application form. So it might be something it's the same subset of the application form for both the planning board and the Conservation Commission, as opposed to having it something where we're pointing them as part of their NOI to another application online and having them fill that out and sort of cross-referencing it. So what we've really talked about is just having, when this is quote unquote finalized, assuming there's a desire to roll it out, then that would be embedded essentially in both permit tracks, anything essentially going to the planning board or anything going to the Conservation Commission. And I know Julie's got her hand raised, so maybe she wants to speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andy. This is great, I think. And just to mention that it actually already is incorporated into our sort of NOI back end OpenGov page. So like, for instance, we just had 455th Street as a notice of intent. If you were to go to OpenGov from the sort of city side and look at the 455th Street application as it's been submitted, from our standpoint, you would see all of this. Actually, you'd see the checklist on there underneath all of the other NOI application form information and materials that they have to submit. Right now, it doesn't show anything because this is sort of turned off for the applicants, but it is actually already embedded. And I think all it's going to take is Diane going in there and like sort of turning it on for the applicants to then be able to see it, fill it out, and then that will come through to us, to the staff side, and we'll be able to see all their answers to all of this.
Okay, and that would be in the files that we look at.
So then that's actually a really good question, and Andy, I don't know if you know the answer
Yeah,
to that.
however, that to your question, I'd have to check with Diane on the mechanics, but the bottom line is it would be visible to you, apparent to you, the information of the responses would be apparent to you the same way as other fields that they've filled out in an NOI. So I don't know off the top of my head whether that would actually appear to you. I think it might appear essentially in an HTML page, the website itself, as opposed to a PDF attachment. But you'd be able to see their responses in the same way, just like you would for other things that they've filled out. So for instance, if you were looking at, if you're looking for, I don't want to go out of this, but if you were searching for another address in a record, and you were looking at the basic assessor's information, map and lot number, et cetera, you would see underneath that is probably where it would populate the listing, and there's sort of a section we're dealing with resiliency. You'd see the questions there, that there are little answers underneath essentially, but that would be a configuration thing we'd have to confirm.
Yeah, but that's like a really good question. That's probably how it would work, but I feel like that's the last piece that we need to work on administratively, is to see how that would show up for the public.
And if the applicant has to go before both the planning board and the Conservation Commission, I assume they'd only have to fill this form out once.
Yeah, again, great questions. It's funny because you asked that question, because it's the type of stuff that we have talked about a fair amount in the office since the advent of OpenGov. So we try to make things efficient wherever possible, and so we would be trying to do that through the back end of the system. But some of these features and these ability to do certain things like that are limited by the software itself and the statutory processes that people follow if you're applying to this board versus that board and so forth. So yes, generally speaking, we will be trying to make it so that they don't have to fill out the form twice. They could, for instance, point to it, the same information or record, elsewhere. But please keep in mind that that is somewhat limited. Our ability to do certain things like that is also somewhat limited by the back end of the software, the system, the vendor that we use for this. We've run into a few situations like that where some things can't be done perfectly or ideally because of that. So just to clarify, that would be our intent. I'm not sure at the end of the day, they might have to populate the fields again in another permit track. We would be trying to auto-populate, essentially to your point, but I can't guarantee that because of the way that the software works. We've had a fair amount of discussion with Diane about the sort of limitations of the software vendor. They constantly get requests for feature additions or adjustments to the way things mechanically work in the behind the scenes so that we can better serve the public, but they're a private vendor, and so they're sort of responding to municipal requests and sort of understanding the type of things you're getting at here that we encounter in the real world. So it's a few things like that we've encountered to date where it doesn't work out ideally, so we do the best workaround we can. It might be that we are able to set up a back end system that, you know, populates it, auto-populates it essentially, but that would be our intent.
Can you turn on Council Wright's mic?
Oh, yes.
I was just kind of wondering, like, you know, it's useful information, I think, for a property owner to kind of see where they're at and, you know, what they can do to make their property more resilient. But like, sort of a moving target with properties, you know, because I mean, they may have a project that's so limited that wouldn't require them to really look at all these things, you know, or they might have a total rebuild, which maybe would require or not require, but be strongly suggested that they would look at all this stuff. So I'm just wondering, you know, even if they were to apply once and then maybe 10 years later, it could be a totally different situation. So really it's more like a tool, I think, for people, and for an overarching sort of umbrella of resiliency status, I guess, that
Yeah.
it seems like each department would be useful to see, but I don't know, I guess I'm struggling with, like, you know, if they only did it once, then what's the point, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the idea here was that this listing, like you said, Barbara, might be updated periodically. You know, they're evolving expectations or trends, you know, 20 years out might be different than today. And so obviously the checklist itself might be modified, you know, on a go forward basis. We might not be able to equate, you know, sort of apples to oranges, NOIs that were filed 20, 30 years ago and how we treated them under the WPA then, right? So it might be akin to that. The sort of thing that occurs to me, again, I'm thinking of sort of like a department head who's thinking about multiple permit tracks and applicant, you know, processes and so forth. The better a checklist like this has a tie to regulations or provisions that the commission or the planning board is pointing to and saying, all right, you know, do you adhere to this provision or not? That's generally preferable in my view. If the questions are pointing to things that we would want to incorporate, you know, from an ideal perspective, but there isn't a provision in the regulations that puts the Conservation Commission or the Planning Board in a position of compelling those improvements or something along that spectrum, you know, and so forth, then, you know, to part of what you were saying, then I'd be a little bit concerned about applicants being expected to go through a process, answer questions that are all perfectly ideal questions to ask and things to educate people about. But I would also, at the end of the day, if we don't have also matching regulations that can call out things that, you know, should be incorporated in a project that where it is applicable, right? Some things aren't applicable, like you said, but if it is applicable, it would make sense to have regulations that can call for those things to be meeting a certain threshold, if you will. And the reason I say it is just because a fair amount of discussion with applicants and their representatives over the years, but where there isn't something in the regulations that is a threshold that has to be met, for instance, you could be having an ongoing dialogue with applicants and they, you know, you and or they may be frustrated a little bit by having dialogue about the aspirational components that were, you know, noted here, but not necessarily having at the end of the day clarity as to where the thresholds are that someone needs to meet, you know, for instance, and you would want to know as commission members that you could press for the best possible outcomes in situations. Applicants would want to know, you know, what's expected of them coming in to some degree. So that would be my primary, you know, suggestion about something like this on a go forward basis. And we're going to roll it out to think about those aspects of it. You know, and there's nothing's perfect, you know, that you have to make progress in every area we can, but I just would want to try to address that as best as possible so that if we're having folks fill it out, it's going to help them, it's going to help the commission, as opposed to being an exercise, but you know, something that might, you know, in some cases sit on a shelf because it doesn't work its way into the project, the plans, the regulations, but it is being talked about in the hearing process.
Yeah.
So.
Council Wright, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question and then a comment. My question is this going to come before the city council in any format? Because Well, my concern is that once you create this document, you're creating pseudo legislation, and that's going to become part of an application process, and people are going to have to answer it to it, and there's no accompanying legislation to go along with it. So I'm very concerned that an advisory board like this sustainability committee is now in a position to create legislation in front of both the planning board and the conservation commission. And so without this coming to the city council for vetting, and because it's going to lead to confusion, it's going to lead to additional questions and concerns. And I'm concerned as a councillor that and representing my constituents that it's now going to become an additional layer or barrier towards getting anything done as far as the planning board and the conservation commission in what's already a very intrusive and has a very high bar for compliance. So those are my concerns.
I'd just be able to answer that, well, maybe partially quickly with some, my perspective on this, having been involved since the beginning and sort of helping develop it, is that it's definitely not legislation, definitely not new regulations, definitely not any kind of legal requirements for applicants. And like I think Barb said earlier, it's really much more of a tool to sort of ask an applicant as they're preparing their plans and as they're submitting applications that end up being in areas that are vulnerable or subject to sea level rise or subject to flooding or something like that. It's asking them to go to like 1 or 2 extra steps to just let the city know, are they addressing some of these things or are they not? There's no requirement for them to answer one way or another on any of these questions. If they could say no, 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 and that has nothing to do with their ability to get their permit. It's simply like a planning tool. We're thinking about these issues in the city as a planning office and as a resiliency committee and as a planning board and a conservation commission and zoning board. We're actively thinking about how these projects will be impacted by their location and how the city needs to respond to that. So this is a tool that we've put in place so that we can have that conversation with an applicant in a way that simplifies it for them in some senses, rather than asking all these questions during a public hearing. They get to kind of see what's going on.
But that's my point, Julia. These questions should not be asked during a public hearing. They're not part of the application process, and they shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. The board shouldn't have any. It shouldn't have conversations about sustainability if it's not in the rules and the regulations.
Well, but it is actually. I mean, it's, at some level, this all is in. Yeah, because under the Wetlands Protection Act and the city's Newburyport Wetlands Protection Ordinance, at a minimum, we do ask questions in our local regulations about how these projects impact and will be impacted by environmental factors. And this is just another piece of that. I don't think we're adding anything new into a requirement for them. It's really just trying to be more specific about what the commission wants to hear from an applicant.
No, I suggest you bring it before the council, because you're creating yet another barrier to getting things approved.
I truly don't see it as a barrier, because they could literally not answer any of this or answer all of the questions as a no, and it has zero impact on their permitting process.
So that's where I disagree with you, Julia. When it comes to once this becomes commonplace, it will creep into the regulations, and it will creep into the decision-making process, whether you like it or whether you want it to or not. Because if someone who completes this form the way you want it completed will get preferential treatment over someone who says no to everything, because it's just human nature to side with a person that completes this in the way you want it versus someone who doesn't complete it. So it's gonna creep into everything that you deliberate on, because because the Conservation Commission is asking is referring to this checklist as if it's an official document.
I could agree with that. It will bring up the conversation more regularly, and that's the intent. And so in that sense, you're right. It will put that on the table for more regularly for projects to come forward, that is part of the regular discussion that is had. But then again, I have to say that because the commission's not allowed to regulate anything that isn't already provided for in the ordinance, which is what the city council has to pass. So the regulations are just an implementation piece for the ordinance. The commission can vote on changes to the regulations as long as those are consistent with what's provided for in the ordinance. So anything beyond that, yes, they would have to come to the city council for review if they wanted to make changes to the law that would require something more of an applicant than they currently have to address.
So it
But-
would be up. So it would be up to me as a city councillor to monitor every single application that comes before you to make sure
No.
that you're not going into areas that aren't covered in the ordinance.
No, not unless you want to be doing that now too, because the same would hold true for anything that the commission does now. The commission just adopted a couple years ago new regulations for, well, several years ago, for land subject to coastal storm flowage. And that's not something, I mean, you could say that about any ordinance and regulation today. I don't think the commission intends to go
I'm
beyond.
just very concerned with the unintended consequences.
You know, do you mind me interjecting here a little bit? Because I'm on the resiliency committee as well, Mark. And I've been, I wasn't involved with this checklist, but I do think, resiliency and sustainability and, working, especially in the vulnerable areas of Newburyport, it's so important to educate people and to provide them with tools to understand, how to make their own properties a little more resilient. I think it's, and I think the city, councilors, I think they're just learning about this themselves. I wasn't involved in that outing that was done to kind of educate the counselors. But I mean, this is something that it really is a tool, like anybody it doesn't have to be a consultant or, the consultants are already doing this because they know the regulations. They're already incorporating a lot of this stuff into the designs, I believe, at least based on what we're seeing. But I think that, it's so important to educate our community as to, what they should be considering as part of these projects. And also it's good for the city to collect data to see how resilient we are going to become as time moves on. And I guess my concern is, that as time moves on, some of these things will have to change because there's going to be, larger concerns. And right now, kind of like this is very low hanging fruit, it seems. But that's my 2 cents.
So I'd like to make a request from the planning director or from Julia, is that when you formalize this checklist, that I sponsor it as a communication to city council for discussion there.
I have no problem with, to your point, Council Wright, communication, sharing with the council. I understand the concern about statutory authorization for components, and I understand that piece. To be clear, part of the discussion tonight, having in the agenda, and on I'm not sure whether it's on the upcoming planning board agenda, I think it's the next one, but was specifically to even get feedback from these two boards because it was discussed amongst resiliency committee members and some reps who were sort of tied in with the permit boards, but not necessarily by those permit boards themselves. And so to your point, in addition to the city council, just having that discussion about whether something should be rolled out, how does it fit in the regulatory regime? We first wanted to get feedback from, as an office anyway, given the suggestion from the resiliency committee, we wanted to get feedback from the actual permitting boards that would be rolling it out, which I think, is parallel to your concern, irrespective of the details about, with the city council and the origins of a regulatory process and such.
Yeah. So
Happy to coordinate with you on that. Yep.
Yes. I would. Yeah. Surely. gather all the feedback you want, but when it comes time to make this something that you're going to implement, I would like to be able to bring it before the council.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to, put together a communication or whatever, to that effect with you. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. If I could make just one comment, on the screen that Andy has up, there's a checklist and it has green roofs. There's something. I have been asking for over a decade, applicants, particularly out in the industrial park, if they would include a green roof. Most had said no. I think one did say yes, but whether they did or did not has never affected whether they got an order of conditions and approval. So, that one has been out there for years and we haven't gotten many, but it hasn't affected whether they got what they wanted or not.
My only comment too here is when I looked at this, it looked more like an application. And I do think the idea is to educate, like that's been underscored here. And I wonder if there's a formatting issue that could make this look like not, it almost makes you wonder, ooh, I do need, like, how do I fill this out? I would be struggling with it a little bit. So I wonder if there's a way to present it more like a checklist with lots of description of like, what is a green roof? Like some people, Steve, would have no clue what, and I know there are places in this that describe that, but maybe that's the first step, is to make it more of an educational tool than to look like a corresponding application, which would throw me.
We did actually have a much, it started out exactly like that. There was all sorts of text and information and boxes with descriptions and sort of educational pieces about what this all means and why, etc. And then we felt like to make it be an actual checklist, like the city of Boston uses something very much like we really borrowed from the city of New York, city of Boston, lots of other communities that have this kind of thing already in place. And in order to have someone go through and check things off, you also don't want them to have all this stuff to read. They'll never look at it. They'll never go through it. So we separated out into two documents. One is a sort of instruction sheet that has all that background information on it that sort of connects directly to each section of the checklist. But you do at this point have to go back and forth. So it's a very good point. The information is there, but maybe we could incorporate it in a more user-friendly way.
But when you go in, it's like you're going into it as an applicant. You have to, you can't play around with it, which is what I started to play around with the test site, but I think it'd be useful if anybody could just go in and play around with it, plug in an address and not necessarily be, having the information saved.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, to be fair, I mean, unfortunately, Diane's not with us this week, so she probably wouldn't thank me, but it's set up in the test portal is set effectively so that we can, each of us go in there, kind of see how it functions, whether or not we think it's clear enough, irrespective, all the details that are being discussed tonight. Mark's concerns, any, concerns there being, from commission members here, all of that stuff. How does it work? Does it work well enough? Is it clear? Should it be reorganized in some way? Steve's earlier question, how is it embedded in the prior permit application, or is it a totally separate thing? All those things we're actually looking for your feedback on. So if you've, run through it, that's exactly the type of feedback I think would be necessary, regardless of where it ends up, to help it.
I think what I'm saying though is have it so that residents don't have to actually file an application to use the tool, because they may not want to go forth with the project if they have to, if they need to consider all these things, or they may, want to just understand, what their property, where it exists, what would be good for their property. And
yeah, we could still have it there in the system or in some, web, format. We can have it there as a tool that people could use independently of a permit track.
Great idea.
As well.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we couldn't do that as well.
And that would in some ways make it more clear that it's not part of the permitting process, at least not right now. I think that's a great idea.
And this is why we want people commenting on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because when I was going through it, I put in my address, And I'm thinking, well, I don't really, I know it's a test site, but once if you remove the test site from it, I don't think people will want to use it just to see what it's all about, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I mean, and it could be placed underneath the Conservation Commission as an additional feature. It's not a permit track, but it's additional feature to help people. It could be put on the Resiliency Committee as well, right? To your point, it could be made available and updated and supplemented for, even, and totally outside of a permit path or in advance of a permit path saying, do you want to take a look at these things before filing or doing a project to help you out?
Yeah.
It can be
Yeah.
used in that capacity too. I think the more difficult and more deep, important question is just when does it get rolled out officially, and if so, what is that format? So,
Yeah, I
when
mean,
it is
I
mandatory.
don't think it should, I think it should only be a tool personally.
As
But
opposed to part of the application form, you mean? Is that?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
gotcha. Yep, yep. So it could be, for instance, you're applying for an NOI and it says, please see here for some additional, suggestions or guidance or, issues like this, right? And they get that
right,
information, but it's not an application that they fill out, but they have that same resource made available.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gotcha.
you could call it like a site planning tool, resiliency site planning tool or something that anyone
Yeah.
could go in and plug in information related to their property and kind of see what their options might be for resiliency. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. Maybe
Well,
that's
thank you
really our
for
step.
taking a moment to offer feedback. If you want to, I'll defer to you, Chair and members. I don't know if you want to carry it on the next agenda to try to get some, give you some chance to play around with it as individual members and come back and talk a little bit more. I think, irrespective of how it gets rolled out and where and when, we wanted to first get feedback from the boards that where it was suggested originally that these two boards might use the tool. It made sense to talk to those particular boards about, rolling that out and then, having it because they're the ones that would be having with us the discussion with applicants about, the mandatory form, what it does, and how clear it is and so forth. So we wanted to get feedback from the current members of those two boards. And then there's a, separate question that, or concern that Councilor Wright had raised. And, there's other factors we'll consider, but first we thought it made sense to ask the two boards that would be tied in, so.
Okay.
So thank you, and I don't
Andy,
know if
could
you
you,
want to carry it or not, but
Andy, could you or Julia send us or send me how to access the system? I looked at this a couple months ago and
meaning you had trouble getting into OpenGov or?
no, well, no, I didn't I think I had to create a login, which I've probably forgotten what I created.
Yeah. If you want to follow up with a separate track, I mean, as long as you have an OpenGov login account, you'll have to create one for the permit, tracking system. But once you have that, it works for all the permits you apply for through that portal for the city, that one login. But once you have that login, then you should be able to get to log into that form and
Okay.
start filling it out and yeah.
Good. Well, I've forgotten how to get to OpenGov, so
Yeah. So
Well, I
Steve,
can send a
if you have
link
any
out to you
trouble-
tomorrow, just after,
Yeah.
just let everybody refresh your memory and just kind of put a couple hyperlinks in an email to you. And then if you have any issues with login, just let us know. We can follow up on your particular login issue if there is one.
okay.
All right. All right, what else? What else we got?
Well, Andy, do you know if we haven't made any progress on getting another member to the commission? I mean, we've got one vacancy. I'm assuming Julie is going to join us at some point.
Well, actually, I defer to the council's process, of course, but I believe that Julia will be able to move forward. We did end up offering the new position or the modified position. It went from 3/4 back to full-time again. But that position has been offered to someone. They've accepted that offer. I do want to let them close that process. That only happened today, so I'll let them close that process with HR properly before I go further. But other than to say that we're, I think, happy that we've got somebody who will fit well and be able to help out and try to fill Julia's shoes and really help to advance all the areas that we need, whether it's going after grants for the city in this type of area, helping the commission, helping applicants through the permit process, helping with city projects where they're in, hazard zones or resource areas, the whole spectrum. So glad that that process seems to be sort of wrapping up. And it probably is a matter of weeks, sort of 3 or 4 weeks maybe before they're in here. We'll have to onboard them and bring them up to speed on various things, but very happy that that process seems to be wrapping up.
Okay, but even beyond Julia, we still have a vacancy that,
Yes, we do.
Yeah, that is a separate question. I'd have to check in with the mayor's office, but yeah, so sorry, to that point, I obviously expect Julia then be able to move forward to the commission there clearly, but I don't know about the other position. More than happy to communicate with the mayor's office if there's any names or follow-ups that need to be done.
yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have a full deck.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
They would limit the issues we've been having. And I'm sorry, Julie, you're gonna have to change your title on Zoom.
Yeah. I'm excited that we hired someone. I'm so glad to hear that, Andy. Sounds like that was good news today.
Yeah, very good. I was gonna say Monday, but Tuesday, very good news for start of the week. So yeah, very happy with that.
All righty. So, what else?
That's all I can think of. Yeah, that's not from my end anyway. We will obviously I would like to do a prep discussion. We'll touch base for the next agenda, just to sort of the format and running the meetings in preparation for the follow meeting. I'm sure maybe where the new person's coming aboard, just to kind of prep with them for the meeting with the chair and vice chair, and then you'll see them at either the first Zoom or first hybrid, depending on where at that point, just the first meeting, and so we'll introduce you, and they'll be getting familiar with the ordinance, the regulations, and statutory provisions that they don't already know, anything like that, and each of the properties and the permits, and so we'll take a few weeks, of course, to get fully up to speed everything in there. But once they are, then back to your full resource in that area. So
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I won't be at the next meeting. I have a longstanding conflict for this next
Okay.
one. So just so you know.
All right.
So the 16th.
I'll write it down this time.
16th, yeah, for the quorum issue. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right. And that's the 16th you will not be at.
That's right. Otherwise, full sail ahead.
Okay.
Does anyone else, for any reason, anticipate being absent that night? Or...
I should be there. I don't have any conflicts.
Okay, great. Hopefully everyone else can.
I might be remote, so Steve, you might be running the meeting again. I'll be at the same place I was last time, having issues with my.
Oh, you need to get a better connection.
Well, it's not my house, so I don't have that choice.
Okay, so we need to make sure Dan's available.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll send out an email tomorrow to Dan and everybody and see if we can get a tally.
Okay. Very good. All right, I'll take one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Have a good evening.
Everybody.
Night.
Night.